Glance at your hands right now. Whatever shade they are, pale enough to need sunscreen indoors, or dark enough to make the sun actually work for it, that color isn't random, and it definitely isn't new. It's the punchline of one of the strangest stories evolution has ever told. A man lived in Britain 10,000 years ago. When scientists finally cracked open his DNA, the result was so strange that some people flat out refused to accept it. He had dark brown skin and bright, piercing blue eyes at the same time. That shouldn't be possible. Not by the version of the story most of us were handed. But this man, we call him Cheddar Man, is a loose thread hanging off the whole picture. And when you pull it, everything you think you know about skin color quietly comes apart in your hands. Because we've been asking the wrong question this entire time. We always wonder why some people turned out light-skinned. Wrong place to start. The real mystery runs the other direction. Our ancestors didn't gain dark skin and then lose it. Dark skin came first. It evolved under ferocious pressure. And to understand why it later faded, you have to understand why they ever needed it in the first place. So let's go back. Further than Cheddar Man, further than farming or cities or language. Look at a chimpanzee, our closest living relative. Now imagine shaving one. Underneath all that dark hair, the skin is pale, pinkish, almost like ours when we're out of the sun. That's the secret nobody expects. The earliest members of our family tree weren't dark-skinned at all. They didn't need to be. Their fur did the protecting. So if our ancestors started pale under a coat of fur, what changed? Something happened on the open grasslands of Africa between 1 and 2 million years ago that set everything in motion. And it had nothing to do with color. It was about heat. Picture an early human, Homo erectus, chasing prey across open savanna under a punishing sun. No shade, no rest, just hours of relentless movement. A body covered in thick fur in that environment overheats and dies. So the fur went, generation by generation, and we became, as far as we know, the sweatiest creature on the planet, packing more than 2 million sweat glands into our skin to dump heat fast enough to keep running when other animals had to stop. That adaptation made us extraordinary endurance hunters, but it came with a brutal hidden cost. For the first time, bare, unprotected skin was sitting directly under one of the harshest ultraviolet environments on Earth, and that is the exact moment dark skin had to evolve. Genetic detective work backs this up with a startling precision. By studying a pigmentation gene called MC1R, researchers found that around 1.2 million years ago, a strong evolutionary force locked our ancestors into dark skin. The fur came off and the melanin came on, almost like the body swapping one shield for another. But here's where most people get the reason wrong. Ask anyone why dark skin evolved and they'll say the obvious thing. Protection from skin cancer. Sun causes cancer, melanin blocks the sun, case closed. Except that collapses the moment you look closely. Skin cancer usually strikes late in life, long after people have already had children, and evolution, brutally, doesn't care what happens to you after you've reproduced. A threat that kills you at 60 can't shape the genes you passed on at 20. So if cancer wasn't the driver, what was? This is where anthropologist Nina Jablonski enters the story, and a clue she spotted in an old medical paper, which she later called a kind of eureka moment. The clue was a vitamin, folate, vitamin B9. Strong sunlight passing into the skin physically breaks folate down in the blood. And folate isn't optional. It's the molecule that orchestrates how a fetus builds its spine and brain in the earliest weeks of pregnancy. Strip it away, and you get devastating birth defects. It's also tied to healthy sperm production. Now put that together. In equatorial Africa, a pale-skinned individual losing folate would have had babies who didn't survive or didn't develop properly. A darker-skinned individual shielding that folate had healthy children. Multiply that across thousands of generations, and dark skin stops being a perk and becomes survival itself. Working with George Chaplin, Jablonski proposed exactly this in the year 2000, and it reframed the whole field. Dark skin wasn't about avoiding cancer. It was about protecting the next generation before it was even born. So by the time modern humans existed, every single one of us was dark-skinned. There was no other kind of human. Hold on to that, because it makes what comes next genuinely strange. Around 50,000 to 60,000 years ago, small groups of these dark-skinned humans began walking out of Africa, north, into Europe, into Asia, into a world with a completely different sky. And up there, the same melanin that had been keeping people alive suddenly became a liability. Why? Because the sun does two opposite things to your skin. It destroys folate, but it also builds something. When ultraviolet light hits skin, it kicks off the production of vitamin D, which controls how your body absorbs calcium. Without it, bones don't form properly. Children develop rickets, soft, bending bones, and twisted legs. It weakens the immune system too. In sun-drenched Africa, this was never a problem. There was always more than enough UV. But in the dim, gray, low-angle light of northern winters, dark skin, so good at blocking UV, was now blocking the very rays people needed to make vitamin D at all. The shield had become a cage, so the pressure reversed. In the north, lighter skin let in just enough light to keep vitamin D flowing, and natural selection slowly began favoring it. Scientists have even pinned down the genes, ones with names like SLC24A5 and SLC45A2. Variants so powerful that today they're found in almost every European, tracing back to a common origin roughly 22,000 to 28,000 years ago. Clean story, right? Humans go north, skin lightens, done. Here's the problem. It's wrong, or at least it's nowhere near the whole truth. And the proof came only recently. And it's the reason Cheddar Man matters so much. Because if light skin spread the instant humans reached the cold north tens of thousands of years ago, then a man living in Britain 10,000 years ago should have been pale. Cheddar Man wasn't. He had dark skin, in the cold, in the gray, for thousands of years longer than the simple story allows. And he wasn't a fluke. In 2025, a team led by researchers at the University of Ferrara in Italy did something no one had managed before. They analyzed the DNA of 348 ancient individuals, people who lived across Europe and Western Asia anywhere from 45,000 to just 1,700 years ago, and reconstructed the color of their skin, hair, and eyes directly from their genes. What they found rewrites the timeline. For most of that vast stretch of history, the majority of Europeans were still dark-skinned. The first faint traces of lighter skin appeared around 14,000 years ago, but they stayed rare, scattered, popping up in the occasional individual, and then vanishing again. Light skin didn't become the dominant look in Europe until astonishingly recently, around 3,000 years ago, well into the Iron Age. Sit with that for a second. When the pyramids of Egypt were already ancient, much of Europe was still home to dark-skinned people. The 5,300-year-old Iceman known as Ötzi, frozen in the Alps, had dark skin. A girl in Scandinavia, identified from DNA on a 5,700-year-old piece of chewed birch tar, had dark skin and blue eyes. Cheddar Man's mysterious combination all over again. There were exceptions, and they only deepened the puzzle. At a 7,700-year-old site called Motala in southern Sweden, hunter-gatherers already carried both major light-skin variants, pale skin appearing in the far north long before it reached the rest of the continent, while people to the south stayed dark for millennia longer. Light skin didn't roll across Europe like a tide. It flickered on in scattered places, like lights switching on across a darkened city, one window at a time. So if cold and weak sunlight were the whole answer, why did it take tens of thousands of years for light skin to win? People had been freezing in northern Europe the entire time. This is the twist the new research is wrestling with. And it points to something we rarely connect to skin color at all: food. Think about the earliest Europeans. They were hunter-gatherers, living on wild game and fish, foods naturally loaded with vitamin D. Their diet was quietly topping up the very vitamin their dark skin made it hard to produce. They could afford to stay dark, because dinner covered the difference. Then, around 10,000 years ago, farmers began arriving from Anatolia, modern-day Turkey, carrying not just seeds and livestock, but those light-skinned gene variants in their blood. And farming changed the menu completely. A diet based on grains and crops is a diet starved of vitamin D. For the first time, people couldn't get enough from food and couldn't make enough from the sun. That double squeeze may be what finally tipped the scales, making lighter skin not just helpful but necessary. There was one more wave. Around 4,500 years ago, herders from the steppes north of the Black Sea, the Yamnaya, swept across the continent, reshaping its people yet again. Europe was never one population gently fading lighter. It was a collision of at least 3 migrations, blending and clashing over thousands of years, and the modern European face only settled into place at the very end of that long, messy process. And here's the detail that should retire the old thinking entirely. Light skin didn't evolve just once. East Asians developed lighter skin too, but largely through different genes than Europeans did. Nature, facing the same problem in 2 places, reached for 2 separate solutions. And in southern Africa, the Kusan people carry a light skin variant traced to humans who migrated back into the continent. The same genetic trick, surfacing again, an ocean away. So the next time you see one of those museum illustrations, ancient Europeans drawn as pale, blue-eyed figures in the snow, Remember Cheddar Man. Remember that for almost the entire human story, there was only one color of human, and it was dark. Light skin isn't the default anyone returned to. It's a recent, repeated, improvised experiment, one that's still, in evolutionary terms, only just begun. We didn't lose our dark skin because we became something new. We lost it because we kept moving, and our bodies are still trying to catch up to where we went.